So I came across this video on YouTube of one ex mafia boss versus 20 cops, it says. And this is on the Jubilee channel on YouTube. And it's a debate because that's the forum that Jubilee normally takes. It's a debate between Michael Franzese, former high-ranking mafia boss, and a group of law enforcement officers regarding the what I would think the ethics and the methods of the justice system, right? And this particular discussion, which goes on for about an hour and a half, centers around whether undercover operations and confidential informants actually manufacture crime or simply provide opportunities for predisposed criminals to act. Right. So Francis argues that that the government frequently uses unreliable informants and illegal tactics to target big name individuals for professional advancement, whereas the officers are saying that there are strict legal standards and organizational integrity that prevent systemic corruption or entrapment. And so they also look at whether or not fear and manipulation serve as a primary driver for success within organized crime groups, and whether or not that legitimizes policing as well. So I watched the video in its entirety, and I was very it reminded me of why I hated debates, because you will see as we go along that there is a lot of strawman argument that was put forward, that people tend to skirt around the issue, that in a lot of instances there was no meeting of the minds. And then in some cases you saw where the law enforcement officers reluctantly acquiesced to a point that Francis made, but then in the same breath try to find some way to wiggle out of that acquiescence, so to speak. And I felt that, this was something that is interesting for me to give a reaction to, and, to basically show you as they go along, at least who appears to be more rational in the debate and who was kind of leading on the side of justifying something that on the face of it may appear to be. Because remember, morality and ethics has nothing to do with law. The law does not care about morality and the law does not care about ethics. But then it creates an atmosphere of hypocrisy, because you're saying that if somebody is predisposed to committing a crime, that predisposition is not illegal. If I am thinking about killing somebody and and I'm working that through my head, and maybe I'm kind of getting the courage to go carry out the act, until I actually do something, I have not committed a criminal offense. Thinking about killing somebody is not a crime. Wanting to kill somebody is not a crime. Wanting to rob a bank is not a crime. It's when you carry out the act, that's when it becomes criminal. So if you are saying you're going to now weaponize my intent against me and create a situation where, okay, I figure out that you want to kill somebody, so I'm just going to put the opportunity in front of you and see if you bite. So what drives you to create the situation for me to decide now whether or not I want to carry out the criminal intent is the ethics and morality of my predisposition to commit this crime. Yet what you are doing is also immoral. So me thinking about committing a crime is immoral, but then you putting me in a situation now to induce me to commit that crime is also immoral. But you're saying that you're justified in your actions, and I am not justified in my mens rea. Come on. Anyways, I think that's my preamble. Went a little bit longer than I intended. Let us take a look at the video. We want to start from the first claim. Here we go.
All right, my first surrounded claim is undercover sting operations often manufacture crime.
And I'm far away.
How do you do?
So you believe that undercover operations create crime?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the word entrapment. So entrapment means that law enforcement officers are inducing a reasonable person who is not predisposed to a crime to commit a crime.
Well, what do you mean a reasonable person? No, in my experience, the undercover operations were either an undercover law enforcement.
All right, so she's saying that entrapment means that law enforcement is inducing a reasonable person to commit a crime. And reasonable person means, just a law-abiding citizen who is not thinking about committing a crime. And if law enforcement now goes out of their way to manufacture a situation that induces that person to commit a crime, then that would be entrapment. Continues.
Enforcement person or somebody, a confidential informant that was put into that situation. That's not a fine, upstanding person normally. The undercover agent, absolutely.
Okay.
But not that other person.
So I've worked undercover. I've worked undercover in multiple situations.
You're a fine, upstanding person.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And looking at it from that perspective, if I was doing a prostitution sting, walking the streets, then people weren't predisposed to committing crime. They could keep driving or keep walking right by me.
Correct.
So the fact that I and my law enforcement agency created an arena for someone to make a decision does not mean that I manufactured crime for them. I did not force them to commit crime. They made that final decision.
I agree with that, and I believe that undercover sting operations are necessary.
Okay.
To catch people that you suspect of being criminals. However, there are situations that I'm very familiar with where they will use another criminal, to go into that, become a confidential informant, and he will help to manufacture a crime by getting people to say things that they wouldn't have ordinarily said, put them in a situation, bring them a criminal activity of some point, and put them into it. So yeah, because they don't know what this other person is doing. I'll give you an example. Michael Franzese, we know he's an organized crime guy. We got our informants told us that, but we haven't been able to catch him in a crime. So let's send somebody in there and see if they can create something to put him involved in. And then we have our crime. That's done.
It is, but sending someone in like a confidential informant, there's also a lot of controls that are on the law enforcement side. Mm-hmm. So whether that person is wired or there is an infiltration of a law enforcement officer on, as part of the act, they're still not causing crime to be manufactured. It's all being done rightfully by the suspect.
I can't agree with that. I cannot. When you wire up a confidential informant and that informant brings criminal activity to that other person because that's the person that's the subject of the sting operation, that's entrapment as far as I'm concerned, because that wouldn't have happened if your confidential informant didn't go in and manufacture that crime. They're bringing him the crime. He's part of that criminal activity.
Understood. But if you didn't want to commit that crime, you wouldn't have to. You could walk away. You could be like, you know what? I don't want to do this robbery tonight. True. I don't want to put a, amount of money on someone's head. I can just walk away.
Absolutely. And if you do, you're not entrapped. But if you do it, then you are entrapped. And that's what the confidential informant is supposed to do, entrap you.
I understand what you're saying, but you just made my argument.
All right. So I'm going to skip it ahead to bring in another, because this argument becomes circular. They keep going back to the same point. So I want to bring someone, I want to skip to where someone else comes in before I give my commentary. All right, here we go.
I think you do, yeah.
Either way, sure, fair. All right, fair, fine. So we're gonna set up a 20-man team, audio, video, all this stuff, just for a random dude?
No.
Right.
Yeah.
That's my point.
No, but what's the difference? Let's put out a name that everybody knows. Let's say it's John Gotti. We know that John Gotti is the boss of the Gambino family. We'd love to see him in jail.
Okay.
But we don't know what he's doing at this point. So we have to figure it out. So let's get a confidential informant, wire him up or do whatever it is that you do, and put him with John Gotti and try to bait John Gotti into doing something, whatever it might be, so that we can get something on him. Tell me you're not manufacturing that.
No, he's still in the crime family. He's still running the mob. It doesn't matter.
Being in the crime family is not a crime.
Exactly.
Sure. Yes, I understand that. No, for sure.
Okay,
Yeah, but
so?
if you still put a CI in the room with him, he's like, hey, boss, you want to commit murder today? He's going to be like, actually, no, we're going to pass on that. Like, no, he's still going to do the crimes he's doing. Now we just have an inside guy to wire that up.
But you don't know that. You don't know that.
That's the point of the undercover sting.
Exactly, but you're manufacturing that particular crime. You are creating that crime.
So no one's going to tell the boss of the Gotti crime, the crime family to say what he's going to do?
You don't, you're not.
Okay, I can't, I can't listen to any more of this part because it's hard to watch, because these are people with guns that can shoot you dead and get away with it. And as you can see, there are two conversations happening at the same time. And I do not believe that the officers, because there's going to be several more, but it's much of the same argument. So there's no point in me, the video is a whole and a half long. There's no point in me, going through all of them basically saying the same thing and reinforcing the same point, right? The officers do not seem to understand that there's a greater, okay, let's put it this way. When you download an app or you create an email account, right? There's a TOS that you have to agree with. You cannot create your account. You cannot download the app unless you agree to the terms of service. How many people read the terms of service? Nobody. Nobody's signing up, is creating a Google account and reading Google's terms of service for creating an email account. Nobody does that. Nobody creates a YouTube account and reads YouTube's terms of service for using their platform. No one does that. You click, I have read and agreed and accepted the terms and conditions of blah, 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 just so you can create the account. I've never read any of these things. Moreover, it is written in legalese. That's a whole other language. So even though it appears to be plain English, it is not, because each word that is in that terms of service has a legal definition. And if you are not aware of what the legal definitions are, it does not matter whether you read the thing or not, you would not understand what you're signing to, because it is not written in plain English for the layperson to understand. But none of us, or most of us, majority of people who create email accounts or make accounts and platforms, do not read their terms of service. We do not. So what it therefore means is that the platform, Google, YouTube, whatever, has a fiduciary responsibility. It means that they owe us a duty of care, because they know we're not reading that shit, and they know that even if we read it, we are not legally educated enough to understand what we are agreeing to. So the law places a burden on these platforms or these entities, because it's the same thing with businesses. They have this, it's the same thing, right? You're signing up for a service or whatever. We'll sign here. You don't know what you're signing. You just sign it because you just need the service. Nobody's reading anything, right? So the law places a duty on them, and there's also a moral and ethical responsibility that you have too, to ensure that whatever you have in the terms of service are reasonable. So when I sign up for Google, there is no reasonable expectation that Google is going to have a clause in there to say, okay, you are now signing over your house and your property to Google LLC. You understand? So Google could not. The law restrain Google from putting stuff like that in there, because they know you're not reading it. So they're, oh well, if you die, your property goes to me by creating a Gmail account. If you die, then all of your debt estate now is transferred to Google LLC. No, they can't put that in there. So it's the same thing. That was a long-winded explanation. It's the same thing when it comes to law enforcement. You owe a duty of care to the society at large to act in good faith in the exercise of your duty, whatever that duty may be. And these officers on this panel does not seem to appreciate that duty of care that they owe to the general public. Right? You are the enforcers of the social contract. That's why we have law enforcement, because law enforcement really are the enforcers of the social contract, to ensure that each individual who is participating in society is upholding their end of the deal as far as the social contract is concerned. And as enforcers, there is a higher standard that we expect. So while I can go out and rob a bank, I don't expect a police officer to do the same, because you have power and authority. I don't. You're walking around with a badge and a gun, and that badge and gun gives you a certain power and authority that the regular citizen does not have. So you cannot, so your actions have to be tempered by the responsibility that is placed on you. So to the claim that undercover sting operations often manufacture crime, this makes sense when you look at it in terms of moral responsibility rather than the letter of the law, because the law has nothing to do with morality. And right, Franzese is making a moral argument, while the cops are looking at it strictly from a legal point of view, and also from what ought to happen, not what is actually happening. So Franzese is looking at it from what is actually happening in real life, and they're looking at it like what is on the book. On paper, this is what we're supposed to do. That's basically how they're looking at it from. And he's looking at, yeah, on paper, this is what you're supposed to do, but in real life, this is what you guys are doing. And that is where the disconnect occurs in the conversation. So when you, in a sting operation, right, the government starts with the person's predisposition, right, which is only an internal attitude and not a crime. So if you suspect me of committing a crime, that don't have nothing to do with me. Because suspecting me of committing a crime and having evidence that I commit a crime are not the same things. Because if your suspicion had any weight, then you could just come and arrest me, take me before a grand jury and have me indicted. But your suspicion has nothing to do with the law. So if you suspect that I have a predilection for committing a crime, it has no bearing on anything, right? So the predisposition itself is not a crime, right? No, the government, because of your predisposition, so we suspect this person is a crime boss, right? And because of that suspicion, the government then creates a situation that is meant to turn that suspicion into reality, or something actionable that it can use against the person. So the opportunity the pressure and the structure of the act all is set up by the state. So even though the law accepts this, as you can see, the police officers are very much defending these sting operations, right? Even though the law accepts this as okay, it does not make the reasoning itself morally correct. And this is where I differ from people in, because as you can see, the officers are to some extent morally bankrupt uh, compared to the ex-criminal. And that is, while he may be, how should I, he has no moral authority to accuse law enforcement of being morally bankrupt, the point still stands. Because what if I was in that room and I was a law enforcement officer on the other side of the debate, and he has made, because you can agree with a factual statement and then provide context. What they're doing is they are basically saying, but, oh, we have all these rules and regulations. And it's like, yeah, you have rules and regulations. What does that have to do with a cop out in the field doing whatever the hell they want to do? Like, what the hell? When you know the system, you know how to game the system. That, like, let's keep it about 50. So, like, why are you pretending as if what he's saying does not make any sense? Now, what I would say is you're making a moral argument and we're making a legal one. And these are two separate conversations. Now, while something may be legal, it may be morally gray. And we in law enforcement operate in a morally gray area because of the nature of our work and how criminals carry out their activities. We cannot always be concerned with whether or not what we're doing is morally correct or ethical. What we are concerned with is whether or not we are acting within the within the confines of the law and within the confines of our duties and responsibilities as law enforcement officers. That is what we have to contend. We have to contend to ourselves. It's just like our soldier going to war. If he is thinking about, the morality of killing an enemy, he's going to end up dead on that field. He has to get his head in the game, knowing that it's kill or be killed, and you go out there and you kill the enemy. And when you get back home, I guess you deal with your conscience. But in the field, you do not have the time to be contemplating the justness or the rightness of killing somebody who is your enemy. You don't have the luxury of doing that because you can end up losing your life and costing the lives of the people that are in your platoon. So you have to just get your head in the game. We are here to kill these people. I'm just gonna kill them and get it over it. You can deal with your conscience afterwards. So if you make that argument, I can respect you for that. But when you're going to sit there and pretend as if what the guy is saying is not true, that you're not setting up these people, you're not creating situations that would not have otherwise materialized but for your involvement, then you are morally bankrupt. And you cannot be morally bankrupt as a law enforcement officer because of the position that you are in. The law can be morally bankrupt because of the nature of how criminals conduct their criminal activities. But you as a cop, so I understand that what I'm doing is unethical. I understand that what I'm doing is immoral, but it is not illegal. And that is something that I have to reconcile within my own self as a law enforcement officer. But I'm not going to sit there and justify the morality or the ethics of it if we are having an ethical and whatever. Because I don't know if they're intelligent enough to understand that he was having a conversation about morality and ethics are not really legal. Right? And they were saying, hey, guess what? If I get you drunk and bring a hooker in the room and you have sex with her and pay her, guess what? It's your fault. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? This is literally what he's talking about is what Jeffrey Epstein did to other people. So he could get blackmail information on them. And of course, there are situations where the crime was literally manufactured and you were coerced and forced into it. Of course, those situations are probably far and few in between, but it does happen. Because once you start crossing the line, anything goes once the line becomes difficult to see. And I think that is what is not being appreciated in the debate from the officers, and I found it very disappointing. And that is why I hate debate, because it's kind of like nobody wants to acknowledge, because like I said, if it was me, because he's making a moral argument, they're making a legal one. And it's like, you can agree that it is morally bankrupt, it is morally incorrect, but I would just say the law does not care about morality or ethics. That is why you have code of conduct. That is why you have corporate social responsibility, right? So because we know that there are just certain things that the law does not uh, cover, then we as a society, we enforce other rules to govern behavior. So it's just like how the church may have a particular set of rules that its members must abide by. What you're doing is not illegal, but it would be against the tenet or the doctrines of the church. And so the church would, in that instance where somebody is found in breach, mete out punishment. When you go to school or any institution, they too have their own rules because they know that there are behaviors that you will engage in that, while not illegal, is disruptive to the school environment. So they create rules around that. When you go to work, it's the same thing. They would create a set of rules for the people who work in that particular organization because while those rules, if you break them, you're not committing a crime, so they can't go to the police and say, hey, come lock this person up. It would be disruptive to the business environment that you're operating in. So morality, ethics, and law are two different avenues, and he's having a conversation about the ethics of you setting up a sting operation, not whether or not it's legal to do, and you're defending it, not understanding that it's a moral argument, right? So you address, you can't, it's like you're having two separate conversations. Address the person's claim on its merit. The context in which the claim is framed is the context in which the claim must be responded to.
Thank you. My next surrounded claim is that law enforcement believes it's okay to violate the law in order to arrest the lawbreakers.
Hey, Mike,
How are you? Nice to meet you.
I want to start with a question. How many cases as a law enforcement officer have you worked?
Have I worked as a law enforcement?
Yes.
None.
Okay. My point is, you don't know the ins and outs from our perspective of how much work, time away from our family, effort to get a good case that's going to stick. You think we want to mess up?
He's creating a straw man argument. You're not address. He's saying law enforcement believes it's okay to violate the law in order to arrest lawbreakers. This has nothing to do with the rules and regulations that you have in place. Because everywhere have rules and regulations. That's why you have law enforcement. There are laws, but people break the laws anyway. So anyway, I don't want to drag it. Let's listen to this bullshit.
All that work up by breaking the law? I mean, you would understand that would seem very foolish, right?
No, not if your name is John Gotti, Sonny Franzese, Michael Franzese, Fat Tony Salerno, Joe Colombo. No, I don't think that's unreasonable that law enforcement would break the law in order to catch somebody that they think is a name like that. I've seen it happen.
And in what ways have you seen it happen?
By suborning perjury, by holding back exculpatory material at a trial, by FBI agents coercing people into testifying, coercing people into going undercover against people. I've seen that my whole life.
And listen, I mean, we can't speak on definites, right? Like I've always taught my kids, any sentence that you start with, like everyone, all, nobody, never, the next thing you say is gonna be a lie, okay? So are there cops that have broken the law, jeopardizing cases that they have worked very, very hard for? Of course.
Thank you.
But
you just made my point.
no, I know, but it's not definite, right? And I would say that the vast majority of police officers, they're not doing that because of the amount of work. But of course, we can agree that it does happen. There's too many people.
All right, let us move on to somebody else because this video is long. He goes on. Most of it is circular argument. Okay, this man, oof, he was the worst. Let's hear him.
How are you?
Well, you've told us a little bit about yourself. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I spent 23 years as an FBI agent, all in Los Angeles. So I have no personal experience of working in New York as an agent, and I never worked organized crime.
You know Scott Garriola?
Yeah, very well.
Good friend.
Yeah, well, very good. I was married to a cop for many years, LAPD. I've known hundreds of police officers and worked with hundreds and agents. And your general statement is that law enforcement believes, it's a pretty broad statement, that it's okay to break the law to get the lawbreaker. And I disagree with that. You're describing an FBI that I don't recognize. I'm not going to argue with your experience, but in the Bureau.
Have you been paying attention to the FBI today?
I have been.
Okay. Will you agree that they've been breaking the law?
No.
You won't agree to that? Today's, not today. The FBI of the last administration has not been breaking the law, doing things that they shouldn't be doing?
No, I disagree with you vehemently on that.
The Biden administration FBI, you say, has been totally above board. Comey has been totally above board.
I am not going to go into some broad political discussion.
I'm not being broad, I'm being factual. You believe that James Comey has not broken the law, you think he's been an honest and upright and law-abiding FBI agent?
I think James Comey was a good director of the FBI while he was the director. I think he operated with integrity and honor.
We disagree.
And he was widely respected while he was director. Do I think he may have made some mistakes of judgment?
Even the officers behind this guy is like, brah, you're making us look bad. Like, what the fuck? Oh my God.
Along the way, yes, I could say that about a lot of
why did he allow Hillary Clinton to smash her? No, excuse me. I would have went to jail for that, and so would everybody in this room. Why would he allow Hillary Clinton to smash all of her computers and everything that she had information on, and not indict her for obstruction of justice?
My understanding of that case is that she was not indicted because they could not prove a criminal intent. Now, earlier
She
today,
admitted that they whitewashed her computers and everything else, all the information that she had in there. She broke her phones and everything else. She admitted to it. She did it.
your argument earlier is that law enforcement will break the law to break lawbreakers, to
Some of
catch lawbreakers. That's not my experience. My experience of the FBI is for every investigative technique, I had to get approval at every step of the way. Let's take a trash cover. For the audience, a trash cover is when law enforcement picks up the trash that somebody puts out on the street. I don't need a search warrant for that. But the FBI requires that I get approval from my supervisor in writing and articulate why I'm going to conduct this operation, what's the purpose of it, and then I have to document the results.
Are you familiar with an FBI agent named Linda Vecchio?
No.
Okay. He was indicted for murder, four murders, because he worked
I
with
think more of your guys than my guys have been indicted for murder.
Absolutely, because we were criminals, but the FBI is supposed
Yes,
to be
you were. You were
upstanding
criminals.
citizens that took an oath to protect people. But we were criminals. I'll admit to that. We didn't take an oath to abide by the law at all, but FBI agents do. And I'm not saying, I want to make it clear, I'm not saying this, I'm not throwing a blanket over everybody.
Of course you are.
No, I'm not. There are a lot of good.
You just make a broad statement that the FBI committed crimes during the Biden administration. They Comey
No, I
committed
said
crimes.
James Comey did. James.
All right, I'm gonna skip because there's a lot of back and forth, and I need to get to somebody else. I want to get to somebody else. I see it's very long. He talks for a long time. This guy came on. I was a little okay. It's okay. Okay, let's see.
Nice to meet you. How you
Nice to meet you. I'm good.
So let me ask you this: what got Gotti got? What got him got?
What got him got?
What got him got?
Well, you want to go to the main witness against Gotti? It was Sammy Gravano.
What got him got?
Clarify.
The mouth,
Oh, the mouth. Oh, no doubt about
Right,
it. I absolutely agree
the
with
wire,
that.
right?
Yes.
Okay. So in order to get that wire, there's certain steps we have to go through,
Yes.
right? A judge has to sign off on that, right? So you have to have all this stuff in place before you even attempt to go in that house, before you attempt to climb up that pole, before you attempt to go and put a confidential informant in there. Most of that stuff has to be laid out. And a good judge is not going to sign any of that. He's going to look at that and say, what has this CI done?
And what will a
prior?
bad judge do? He'll just sign it, right? Because so you have good bad judges.
Right, but most of the time there's a big trail. There's smoke, there's fire, right? 90% of the time. So what got him in trouble was he couldn't shut up,
That's true.
right?
I agree.
And that's what gets most of crime bosses in trouble.
Well, not the chin.
Okay, how do you go there?
Huh?
How do you go there?
Me?
Yeah, how'd you go there?
Never on a wiretap.
Never on the wire?
No.
Okay, so your mind, how did you go there?
How did I go
Can
down?
you say that?
I had an
Can you talk?
informant.
Okay, well, was this informant, did he face you in court?
One time he did, and I was acquitted. Yeah.
Okay, he testified?
Yeah.
All right, so how did you get acquitted? What did they say the informant didn't or didn't prove?
Well, he lied. That's
Okay,
my
but
point from before. He
so
lied.
your attorney got you off, right?
He didn't get me off. I was innocent. So he lied.
What did he lie about? But what did he lie about?
He
Say,
lied
what did
about me.
to say? So
He lied about the facts that they were trying to prove against me that were ridiculous, and the jury saw through it, and I got acquitted. And again, I'm not throwing a blanket over every person in law enforcement. But what I'm saying is, in certain situations, I believe law enforcement thinks it's okay to violate the law to catch a lawbreaker because, well, we can't get him for what he didn't do, so let's try to manufacture something or get him something that we can pin on him.
so you say, man,
And that is the substance of the claim. He's saying that in certain situations, because he was a high value target, right? He was an organized crime boss. And so when you get to these high profile criminals, John Gotti, whatever, the law enforcement officers, they know that he is a criminal. They know that he's engaged in criminal activities. They just do not have sufficient evidence to take to a jury to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this person is a criminal and should be locked up for their crimes. Right? So what they do, which is his contention, is that we know this man is a criminal. He is so good as covering up his crimes that we can't catch him in the act. So we will have to either manufacture evidence, create a situation, or do whatever it takes to get this nigger locked up. That is the substance of his claim. And they're sitting there acting as if they don't know what he's talking about. Talking about procedure. Like, we see police brutality on display. There is nothing in the police handbook that says you should go out there and brutalize and terrorize citizens. Nothing. But police officers do it anyway. And then they find the loophole. They turn their body cams off. Or they yell gun when they want to shoot and kill you. Or they say that, oh my God, I was in fear for my life. So they know what the rules are. And so when they want to break the rules, they create the situation that gives them justification for doing what they do. So that they are covered by saying, oh, I followed the rules because I thought he had a gun. I yelled gun before I shot him 3 times in the fucking chest. right? Or, they get a junkie to go put some drugs in your car trunk, and then they pull you over and say, oh, you got a busted taillight, or they bust out your taillight, right? We see that. They bust your taillight out, and then they have the patrol pull you over because they know something is in the car, but someone busted your taillight, right? And direction of the law enforcement as a pretext to pull you over because they don't have any probable cause to pull you over. So they manufacture probable cause. We know this. And that is the substance of the claim that he's making. And they're sitting there acting. And this is what I hate about debates, because you can address the claim on its merit, and then you can provide context for why it happens or whatever the situation might be. But they're not addressing the claim. They say, oh, there are rules and the regular, oh, the judge has to sign off on this, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but you have corrupt judges. Like, the hell? You have corrupt judges. You have some judges who don't care. They will take the minimum evidence. Like, we know this. They'll take the minimum evidence required to sign off a warrant. Because remember, judge have, what they call it? Something like that, immunity. Judges have immunity against the decisions that they make, in case people don't know. So you can't, if a judge sentences you to 50 years in prison for a crime you did not commit, you can't sue the judge. You can't sue the judge. You can sue the government, but you can't sue the judge. The judge has immunity. Even if that judge knew, of course you can't prove it anyway, because these people know the system, so they know how to game it. And that is the substance of the claim. You people in law enforcement, you understand what the rules and regulations are. So if you're going to kill somebody, you turn the body cam off. Or you create a situation that gives you justification for killing the person. Oh, I thought he had a gun, so you yell gun. You didn't see any fucking gun, but who's gonna know that you didn't see a gun? You yelled gun, and we can see it on the video, we can hear it in the audio when you yelled gun, so you must have seen something that looked like a gun. You didn't, but how are we gonna know that? So you manufactured the justification for you committing the illegal act. That's what he is talking about. So of course, and so that is where the problem is. Kind of like, if your company is on some bullshit, you can't come out and tell the public that, yeah, my company is on some bullshit. You're going to engage in a circuitous argument and not address the issue, which is what they're doing. And this is why I hate having debates or watching debates, because it's like the whole point of a debate is to win an argument. You're making your point, I'm making my point, and there's no meeting of the minds, when it should be a conversation to arrive at truth. So the claim is that law enforcement believes it's okay to violate the law in order to arrest lawbreakers. Now, the claim does not say that law enforcement formally approves criminal conduct or that most officers behave in this way. It says that in real situations, some law enforcement officers treat breaking the law as an acceptable way to arrest people they believe that should be arrested. So in that context, the claim matches documented behavior in high-profile policing rather than any official policy statement. So the claim is not, he's not making the claim that this is the official modus operandi of law enforcement agents. He's saying that on the ground, in real life, this is what happens, especially in high-profile cases. So the officers are correct that the system is set up to discourage bad behavior amongst people, because at the end of the day, when they build a case, that case has to meet the legal standard for it to be able to stand up in a court of law. That we know, that we can agree on, and that we can accept. So those safeguards that are in place, of course, they are important, but they do not fully capture how power is used when the officers are under pressure to make an arrest. In cases that involve organized crime figures or other high-value targets, the focus often changes towards incapacitating the person. So in those settings, and I believe this is the context in which the claim is being phrased, having regard to the fact that this man is an ex-organized crime boss. So this is the context in which he's framing most of his claims. He's like, I was a organized crime boss, and these have been my lived experiences. I am not speaking based on speculation. I'm talking about what I know, what I have witnessed, what I have suffered. And they're sitting there acting as if, oh my God, we're all, the second cousin twice removed from Jesus Christ. Come on. Right? So in those settings, or in the context, right, the actions that are clearly illegal, right, can be justified as tools for reaching that goal, arresting the high-profile target. So they can fabricate evidence, they can manipulate information, and they can manufacture violations, right, as a way to get to the high profile target that they want, and so they engage in that kind of behavior. And that is what Franzese is saying. So his argument is reflecting the reality of what is happening on the ground. This is what is playing out in real life. When you jump in the squad car and you go, this is what you're doing. We're not talking about what is in the policy document and the station. Everybody knows that. Everybody has read the manual. But what are you doing when you're in these streets? What are you doing when you're under pressure to catch the criminal? That is what we're talking about. We're not talking about what you should do. We're talking about what you're actually doing. And that is the difference between, when you watch the entire thing, he's talking about what you're doing and they're talking about what they should be doing. Two different conversations. I don't care about what you should be doing. I care about what you should do. If you should read me my rights and ensure that, you follow the rules and regulations of arresting a suspect, because you're not a criminal until you're officially convicted, right, of a crime. You're not a criminal until such time you're an innocent person until proven guilty, right? So you're a suspect or a person of interest, right? But if you're not doing that, if you want to arrest me and you create a whole scenario just so that you can arrest me because you had no justification and you want to get me off the street, so you manufacture a situation, fling me in it, and then arrest me on that manufactured situation, and then you're going to say that you're justified in doing what you're doing. That does not make any sense, but that is the argument that they're trying to defend. And I think this is what, because you're not having an intellectual, you can never have an intellectual conversation with people in law enforcement because they are always disingenuous in how they conduct their affairs. They're always going to find justifications. And it's like, but you're acting like the criminals. You are, if something is immoral, you can say it is immoral, but it's not illegal. And that's the end of the story. We are concerned with the law. Our business is enforcing the law. So whether you view it as an unethical or immoral act, that's besides the point. I can respect you for that and say, I know it is immoral. I'm not stupid. I know this is immoral, but we can do it, so we do it because it's not against the law. Simple one, too. But they can't do that. And so when you can see that, you can just see the cult. I'm sure these are all people who don't know each other. But there's still this cult, like there's this code of I don't know what to call it, that they're following. And it's like, that can never be good for business because if you're because this is how the bad apples that you're talking about gets protected. Because instead, if one of your fellow officers are accused of breaking the law, what do? Figure out if the allegations are true. It's just that simple. No, you protect them. That's how it works. And then you're going to say, oh, it's not all cops. It's like, I don't give a fuck. Because when the bad apple is out there doing some bullshit, you guys step in and you form a protective barrier around him, then it's all of you. And they don't seem to get that. And that is what they do every single time. You have a bad cop, and the only time that cop gets into trouble is when the evidence is so, they can't do it. It's like, we can't help you with this one. There's nothing that we can do. We can't cover this one up because it's already out there. And they don't seem to understand that. And it's like, if you are supposed to be the enforcers of the social contract and you're out here, terrorizing citizens, then what do you expect? How do you expect the citizens to respond to you? And if you cannot sit there, if you're going to sit there with a straight face and you cannot accept that an act, though legal, is immoral or unethical, then something is wrong with you. And none of them can, I think it was one lady who seemed to be reason was the lady in the red. So Franzese was looking at the real, like, this is what is happening. I don't know about your, because I don't need to be aware of what your procedures are. I don't need to know if you need to read me my Miranda rights if you didn't read it to me. I can say, if they're like, did he read you your rights? No. What does that have to do with whether I know what the procedure is when you come to make an arrest? It doesn't matter. What matters is what you do. And if I'm saying this is what you're doing, you cannot point to the procedure because then obviously you're not following the procedure. So it's neither here nor there. It has no bearing on the situation. We're talking about what it is that you're doing when you're out in the field. And if what you're doing when you're out in the field is not according to the procedures that you're supposed to be following, citing the procedures is besides the point. Which is what they keep doing. They keep referring back to, there are these things that we have to do, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, and yet these bullshits keep happening. So clearly, yes, you have these rules and regulations and standards and blah, 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 but people know how to get around them. You're in the system long enough, you know how to game the fucking system. You know how to massage the rules to get what you want. It is what it is. So we can at least accept that because that's the reality of the situation. And then you can form a context into why it happened and whatever the case might be. Not justifying, but we're still talking about, we're still keeping it real, we're still keeping it a buck, we're still keeping it 150 to say, hey, well, this is really why it happens, right? And this is what we're doing to kind of ensure that it doesn't happen, we don't have this as a systemic rot, but they're not doing that. Okay, so the claim is law enforcement measures success by arrests and not by safer streets. This one is a little bit tricky, so let's hear it.
Success by arrests and not by safer streets. How are you? How you doing, sir? Good.
So I'm from Houston, Texas. I'm big on, DWI, DRE. So most of the time I don't answer calls at all. my work is driven off of stats, arrest. So for you to make that kind of claim is very, misleading and dangerous, because most of the time I'm putting my life at risk to stop impaired drivers, drunk drivers. So which means if I see somebody driving, wrong way, I'm probably going to put myself in harm's way to, stop that driver so that somebody doesn't get hit or killed. So I don't believe in your claim. Do you have any experience in that at all?
Well, again, my experience comes from a different place, being in the world of organized crime, growing up in that, being a subject of several arrests and investigations, and watching others also. In that world, there's no question that people, not safer streets that they're concerned about. They're concerned about the arrest and what it brings to them personally.
So would you say making arrests with your own organized crime is different from me making arrests from DWI?
Yeah.
So what makes that difference if we're still making arrests on bad guys? It's just different crimes.
Well, again, it goes back to the totality of the situation. You're not manufacturing a crime. You're not targeting. Let me tell you the difference with organized crime, okay? You just pointed it out. You go after the lawbreaker because you're watching them violate the law, drunken driver or whatever, right? Okay, so you go after the person that's committing the crime. But a crime has been committed. In organized crime, they go after the person and hope that they commit a crime, or wait for them to commit a crime because they think that they're a lawbreaker. You're not watching this guy for a few months thinking he might be a drunk driver and then waiting for him to get in a car drunk, right? You're not doing that.
That's not what I'm doing.
No, he's drunk driving and you're going after him, correct? Because he's committing a crime at that moment.
Okay.
That's okay. That's what you're supposed to do. It's a different investigation.
Pause. Vote it out. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So in this conversation with this officer, he lays out the context for the claim. And this is one of the biggest issues in most of these debates. If I am making a claim and you cannot disagree, so you can't create a context for yourself and they disagree within your own framework because you're debating me. If I am coming forward and I am putting forward a claim, you must address the claim on its merit, right? You must address, and if there's obviously if you don't understand, you can say, can you give me some context? That's what you're supposed to do. So if it is a situation where you realize that, okay, maybe there's a disconnect, I'm not getting it. Okay, can you give me some context? What is the context in which you're framing your claim? Right? Because the context in which this claim is being framed, though it appears to be generalized, it is not generalized. It is still within the context of organized crime. So he's saying that the law, the FBI specifically, because I guess it's the FBI that deals with these high-profile cases, the FBI, they measure their success based off of how many of these high-profile guys they can arrest and prosecute, right? And then they get these career advancements, they prosecute, the district attorney or assistant district attorney now become a judge or a Supreme Court judge or whatever the case might be. So they have an incentive to lock up these high-profile criminals. And because of the incentive and the inducement, then they tend to, cut corners, break the rules, break the law in doing so. And I think that is if you notice, most of the claims that he's making, the claims are within that framework. The officers don't seem to understand that. They're arguing from their point of view. And it's like, you can't argue from your point of view because you're not debating yourself, you're debating him. So you have to debate him from his point of view. And if his point of view is wrong, you have to show him why his point of view is wrong. And then you reframe it. But you can't reframe it without debunking what he is saying. You can't reframe it and then use your reframe to debunk what he's saying, because that is not how you have a debate. I am addressing the merit of your argument. I am showing you why it has no merit. And then I can reframe it to show this is how it would make sense. But the way you are putting it right now, this is why it doesn't make any sense. You understand? That is how you have the conversation. So the person can understand where they went wrong. Because sometimes it's just a word that throws the statement out of balance. Okay, because you say only or always or whatever, then that is what makes it false. But if you use this word instead, then you would be justified because that indeed do happen. But the way you frame it mischaracterizes the situation, and based on the framing alone, you are wrong. So they can understand that, okay, I get it. But they set up their own argument, their own framework, their own context, and it's arguing within their own context. While he's sitting over there like, you're not getting it, that's not what I'm talking about. Right? So essentially, one of the cops was saying that, because I have to, oh God, the thing is so loud. One of the cops was saying that, the streets are safer, because he's looking at arrests versus safer streets. And it's kind of hard to, I'm just going to talk because the goddamn video is so long. It's 1.5 hours and, I can't listen to all of them. So he's saying that law enforcement, so it's a the statement is a little bit difficult to assess in terms of the claim, because arrest record is a more quantitative metric that the law enforcement organizations can use to assess an officer's effectiveness, right? But safer streets is a little bit more subjective, and like, how do you measure that? And of course, that would have a more long-term outlook. It would have to be, you would have to assess that. Oh, you know, you can't just, okay, you arrest 10 people today. That's not going to immediately manifest in the streets being safer tomorrow, right? So you'd have to look at over time, and then of course, but the officers need promotion. You need to know who to be team lead, blah blah blah. How do you make that decision? It would have to be with arrest record. So we understand that on the law enforcement side, even though that is not the framework or the context in which the conversation is being had, but just to give some context for why arrest records may be more important to law enforcement as an organization, is that the arrest records can be counted, they can be compared, and they can be rewarded within the promotion systems, right? Funding decisions and also public narratives. Oh, we had 500 arrests last year, but how do we say the streets are safer? What metric do we use to measure that? How do we justify making a claim that the streets are safer? But we can say we had 500 arrest record, and we can compare it to a previous period to see whether or not we're doing better. Because if you're arresting more criminals, it simply means that the police technically are more effective at catching people who are engaged in criminal activities at the very least, right? And so safer streets don't really operate in the same way. You're looking at something that develops over time, and it depends on a lot of different variables that is outside of the police control. And so it cannot be adequately or systematically tracked back to a single officer or case. And so that is where the safer streets become a little bit more difficult to assess. But the imbalance between whether or not people feel generally safe, because safer streets simply means that we as citizens, we feel safer. You know, because the police will, it's like we have here in Jamaica where the prime minister is saying, oh, crime is down, blah, and people don't feel safe. Okay, fine, there are less murders than last year, but what does that have to do with anything? We don't feel safe anyway. You understand? They're saying, oh, crime is down, this is down, da 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 da, but we're not seeing that translate in our lived reality. If I'm still afraid to go out at night, it doesn't matter whether 10 people less died this year than last year. It doesn't make a difference. I still can't go out after 6 o'clock. So it doesn't matter. Yes, we are happy that 10 less people have been killed, but we are still not safer as a result of that, right? And so that is where that's what he's talking about. Is like you're too focused on how many people you're arresting, and you're not looking at, okay, what is your impact on the communities in which you're operating? Does the police presence in a particular community leads to the residents of that community feeling safer? Because that is the objective. That's the overarching objective of law enforcement, that people feel safe going about their lawful business. So if what you're doing is not translating into that, then we have a problem. So you can't just focus on arrest records and you're not focused on the impact that you're having in the community that you're operating from. And they don't seem to get that, and they don't seem to understand. And that is, it's like these people seem, and this is generally, if you talk to any law enforcement, this is generally the one and two that you will find, and these are usually the ones that are disillusioned with the system. But the ones who are in there think they're doing a fine job, this is how they all think. They're like fucking drones. And it is very scary to listen to them sometimes, because it's like, oh my God, come on, man. You know, there is no moral center that you have. You're just in this cult called the police, called law enforcement. And you feel that you're justified in whatever it is that you're doing. And that is a scary mentality to have. And that's, you know, there's just this one lady in the red who seemed to be a little bit more grounded. I don't know if she's actual law enforcement, but she seemed to be more on the human side of it, where she, you know, there is a critical understanding that she have of the nuances that you have to navigate and the tight spaces. And because you're walking a tight rope between the law, ethics, and morality, then it requires a certain kind of moral fortitude as a law enforcement officer that you're going to enter in there. You have to be very pragmatic, but also morally sound. So when you operate in the morally gray, you have a strict rule that you, as the actor, the law enforcement actor, is following, lest you find yourself, you know, breaking the law. But these guys don't seem to understand that you must be ever vigilant, that you don't become the criminals that you're trying to lock up. They don't seem to understand that. it's the same thing with people who are, either experts or intellectuals. It's kind of like, they act like they know everything, so you can't do that. Even if you think you have achieved some level of enlightenment, you don't know everything. So you have to remain humble, and you always have to seek knowledge. That's how it works, right? But people fall into this kind of um, uh, what do I call it? Superiority complacency. I don't even know if that makes sense. But it's kind of like, okay, I know what I'm doing, and because I know what I'm doing, I don't have to cross my T's and dot my I's. It's like you have to double check all the time because you're in a precarious position. When you're in law enforcement, it's easy for you to become disillusioned with this, with the thing. You lock somebody up today and tomorrow they're out on the streets. That's frustrating. That's demotivating. That's demoralizing. So how do you stop yourself from falling into this pit of despair and now becomes so um corrupted that you're gonna do whatever it is. I need to keep this guy behind bars because he's doing all this stuff, and you are personally affected by the crimes, especially if it's like murder and stuff like that. Of course, domestic violence, those things will mess you up. But how do you stay within the bounds of the law as an individual and not let those things affect you? It has to be a constant battle with your own morality. They don't seem to understand that. It's kind of like, well, we do whatever the fuck we want. Well, they're not saying that, but they're big, they're like, oh, we have these rules and procedures. Like, bro, come on, cut the bullshit. So, it becomes, while you're correct to say that, arrest um, is basically what we have to use to as the metric to assess, how well we're doing, it's like you're missing the point. Because you must now look within the communities that you're operating and look at the general sentiment of the citizens in those communities. Do they feel safer based on what you are doing? And if they don't, it doesn't matter how many criminals you think you arrest, you are failing. Because the whole point is that you're there to serve the citizens as enforcers of the social contract. And if they don't feel that you're doing a good job, then it simply means that you have to go back to the drawing board and you have to reassess and you have to wheel and come again. That's how it works. But it is, I don't know, it's like watching all of them. There's this, it's kind of like they're I don't know, the word is escaping me. It's kind of like it's a cult. And these people are brainwashed, and so they're just following a script, they're automatons following a script. And it is very, because like these are law enforcement officers. These are people with guns and badges. They can shoot you in the face. You know what I mean? And it's like, just to hear their thought processes and the mental gymnastics that they're trying to go through, as much as they're not intellectually capable of doing it, to justify the foolishness and walk outside of the claim. No, I'm not saying that this dude Franzese is innocent. He knows what he's doing, right? But you can, but then again, it requires a certain kind of intelligence to navigate a conversational landmine, and they don't seem to be able to have that intellectual capacity to do so. And I think maybe that they probably need some FBI. They probably should have had some FBI people, like top FBI, those genius people who are kind of like behavioral experts who would be. They probably would have just manipulate the situation anyway too, and not have a honest, intellectually honest conversation. Anyways, I'm gonna. It's already too long, so I'm gonna cut it off here. But these are my thoughts. I was very disappointed, except for the lady, and I didn't even play her stuff. Except for the lady in red, she acquitted herself a little bit better than everybody else that would. All the others seemed just so. It's like they made me scared of law enforcement because I'm like, the way you think is very dangerous. The way they think and their justification, and you can see how it's like, yeah, you shoot me in the face and say you thought I had a gun and you were in fear for your life. The way they're like, that's what it's giving. Like, yep, I'll shoot your ass and try gun, knowing full well you didn't have no fucking gun. The way they're trying to justify the foolishness and I think most of it probably had to do with them not understanding the context in which the claims are made, because context matters. He's talking from an organized crime perspective, and he's talking about stuff that really happens. So for you too, if I'm like, Hillary Clinton, because he did say something about Hillary Clinton with the FA. Hillary Clinton destroyed her emails. If you disagree, you have shattered your own credit. And the guy sit here and disagreed. And it's like, dude, just to show you how morally bankrupt these people are. He's sitting there disagreeing with something that is a fact. And it's like, it does not help your case. You are supposed to be an officer of the court or of the law, and we are expecting you to be honest. Because you're not, this is not a criminal. You can lie to criminals when you're on the job, but when you're talking to ordinary citizens and they're asking you questions with respect to how you exercise your duties, you ought to be upfront. You ought to be forthcoming. You ought to be honest. And so it is a situation where it's kind of like, oh, well, I don't want to say that Hillary Clinton committed a crime because now you find yourself in hot water. And it's like, to me, it's like, okay, I'd rather not comment on that because this is a politically charged situation. And based on my association, if I were to proffer an opinion, it may cause issues. And so that is not why I'm here. So based on that basis, I am just not going to get into that. So respectfully, if we could switch from that and then address your claim, fine. You understand? But don't sit there and lie and say, oh, she didn't commit a crime. She did commit a crime. And so it just makes you an unreliable person in this debate. And, this is something that, like, you can just see the mindset. Like, these are the people who point the gun at you, shoot you in the face, and say they were in fear for their life when it's nothing of the sort. They just come to kill you. You know what I mean? I mean, that might be a little bit too harsh, but this was my take. Like, I was so disappointed that an ex-criminal, an ex-mafia boss, seemed more morally sound than law enforcement people. It is scary. And that was really the driving force, the impetus for me kind of like reacting to this video. Anyway, I think I talked well over the time. That's it. And if you guys would want me to do something more like this going forward, then let me know. But I'm just doing this for the, it's easier to do it this way. I had to go through a whole rigmarole of setting up, the thing, so I could do this, but I finally managed to get it done because I'm not a tech person. I did this all by myself. And here we are. So I'm gonna stop it here. If you would like me to do something, if this is something that you guys like, then you can let me know and I will probably make more videos like this. If not, then I just go back to my regular TikTok 9-minute musings, as it were. Thank you for watching, and I guess I'll see you in the next one.